Welcome to another episode of From a People Perspective, a show hosted by Martin Hawk. This week, Martin sits down with Yiorgos Boudouris, Senior Talent Partner at Zensurance. With experience recruiting across startups, government, finance, and high-growth technology companies, Yiorgos brings a thoughtful perspective on what it really takes to build meaningful candidate experiences and high-performing hiring teams. In this episode, Martin and Yiorgos explore how trust has become the foundation of great recruiting, why challenging hiring bias leads to better talent decisions, and how AI can enhance recruitment without replacing the human element. This podcast is brought to you by the People Group. We're on a mission to economically empower people leaders. By joining our community, you'll gain access to career opportunities, a network of over 6,000 modern people leaders, and exclusive tools and resources. Learn more at thepeoplegroup.com.
Here's the problem with most HR data. You have it, you just can't do anything useful with it fast. HR teams spend 70% of their time on admin, not strategy. Rippling built their AI on one unified data model. HR, IT, finance, payroll, all connected. Ask it a real question, get a real answer. No canned responses, actual live data from your company. And yeah, it could take a picture of a whiteboard and turn it into a report. That part's real too. Rippling, built for people ops teams who are tired of the gap between knowing and doing. Rippling.com.
Stress.
Yiorgos,
Hello.
thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you, Mark.
This has been a long time coming. We've been talking about doing something for eons.
Is this your way of telling me that I've been avoiding you?
No. I mean, this is my way of acknowledging that, like it takes a lot to get something done sometimes on my end. So I would say no. I'm taking responsibility on this one. No, glad. Where should we start? Where should we dive in? First and foremost, before we dive into like your backstory and all that fun stuff, let's do some quick icebreakers. You are left with only one musical artist or album for the rest of time, for whatever reason. Well, it's the only one you can listen to or play. What album or artist do you choose?
It's Florence and the Machine.
Okay.
Yeah. Done and done.
You say that like it's obvious. It's like, oh, there's only one choice.
I mean, I hope that wherever I am in these circumstances, there's no one around me, because they would be really sick of hearing me sing horribly along to those tunes. So it's not in the interest of the general public. That's all that I have to listen to.
That's fair. Dog Days, I guess, or what song are you? All of them.
I'll take it all. But I do have like a Spotify playlist where it's just like songs that I like to like belt to when you're like cleaning or that sort of thing. And she has a song called June that
June
in my head is in my tone and my abilities. It is absolutely not.
It sucks when you do the playback or when you kind of really know and you're like, oh no, I was really good at that. And then you're like, no, this is just mediocre karaoke voice, if anything, right?
And like used to do, this is how musical I am, but like you would put your ears inwards, right, to like hear yourself. Like I don't know that there's I don't know if the science is there, but I remember doing that as a kid. You would like do this so you can hear yourself more.
I is that science? I don't know if that's science. Yeah. I'm gonna try that. I want to try it. Does it sound? No. Well, we'll see. All right, next one. All right, your I don't know, midnight snacking. What's your go-to?
Oh, the legitimate questions. Probably just chips.
Chips.
And let's be very Canadian. Ketchup chips.
Ketchup chips, like ketchup Lay's.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's. I've seen other brands try to take on the ketchup flavor. I feel like there's Ruffles. I've seen Ruffles or a version of Ruff, like the wavy chip. It just doesn't sit well with me. I'm like,
No, it's too aggressive. I'd like not to see the stain of ketchup on my teeth the next morning.
yeah, that's fair.
That's my barrier to be like, too
Yeah,
much, too much.
yeah. No, I'm definitely not like I'm a big midnight snacker, and if yeah, I'm not brushing my teeth in at midnight. Like it's not great for like my dentist would not be happy to listen to this, I'm sure, but
Are you
or maybe
stealing
happy
your
because I'm
kids'
keeping them.
snacks?
Sorry.
Are you stealing your kids' snacks? Like, do they catch you? Like, take
Now, see,
them?
there's real questions right there. That is a flaw. That is a big flaw of mine. Like respecting other people's food in the house is not a strength of mine. I've been called out on it, and my wife used to call me out on it as well. And it wasn't like, oh, don't eat this. Like it's gotten to that point. Like this is for me, not you. But previously it was like, oh, there's like this cake in the fridge and I'm just gonna have it, and one bite turns into, yeah. But the girls shamed me, like my daughter shamed me into like, no, I have to. So for all the years that Karina had to put up with me, it was like a few times of just seeing the girls cry, like, where's the thing that I was waiting for the next day? And like, oh, okay, all right, we're not doing it. Can't do that anymore. So yeah. Yeah. Um let's dive in. Yorgos, we know each other. We worked together a while back. I learned so much from you, and the reason I wanted to do the podcast today is cuz there's definitely a few areas where you shine that I think nobody else shines on, and I think that would be a cool thing in place to kind of like dive into. But for the folks listening, possibly snacking on ketchup chips. Um, would love to just get like your background story, how it all began. How'd you get into the wonderful people ops world?
Yeah, I am one of those rare people who've like been in some form of recruitment their entire career. It's just like the nature of it has been different.
Okay.
And I always attribute it to if you remember those university recruiters, the ones who would come to your high school potentially and they would talk to you about why you should go to their university and sort of the programs and all of that. Um, there was one who came to my school who I thought was phenomenal, and I just wanted her job and very much like followed it. I
No
went to
way.
the university that she represented. I worked in the office from my first year until my last year alongside her in various roles. And then I did the exact same job that she did and went back to my high school to do the same pitch. And so again, different type of recruiting, but like the fundamentals were there. And it just really appealed to me. And I was lucky to have that exposure early on.
So wait a second. So you intentionally manifested this job into like someone came to your school and you're like, I want that person's job, and then you met them and then you ended up working with them.
Yeah, I even
Oh,
did the same degree that she did. I'm not very original there. I was like, well, if that's all the things that she did to get here, then like, let me go, let me cook.
okay, so let's double click on like what's the how that's so that's a strategy. I love that. I mean, as recruiters, we obviously appreciate someone's gusto and like uh what's the word, the they're just like energy towards, you can kind of pick up on like, oh, this person really wants this role, they're really working hard for it. It sounds like you did that for this particular role in more ways, like taking the same class, like maybe I'm overthinking this and just be like, we can move on, Martin, but like that sounds kind of pivotal. Like how before that, what were you thinking of doing, I guess?
I don't know if I had like plans of it. My parents are entrepreneurs. They owned restaurants and catering businesses, and so that was my exposure. I didn't really understand what corporate jobs were or anything like that. I
Yeah.
think it's also very like typical of like a newcomer story, where all the jobs that my parents spoke to me about were just kind of like the stereotypes as well of doctors, lawyers, that sort of thing, and it's not to say none of those interested me, but I guess like seeing someone in their job being incredible at it, and I finding it exciting was like, oh, I think I can piece together the same path for myself. But no, it wasn't. I didn't know this is where I would end up, but I'm thankful that it is.
Was it how did you feel when you realized, oh, I'm working with a person that like months ago, if not years ago, like a few short years ago? How did it feel to kind of reflect on that and say, oh, I set out to do this. Whoops. I set out to do this and now I'm doing it.
I think it was only in reflection that I realized like how much it just sort of followed that path. But certainly, like I mean, I would like to think that the office, like the liaison office, as it was called at the university, I'd like to think that they thought of me as like their little kid or something like that. I truly did every job that they could. I was a room tour attendant, so I lived on campus, and when tours would come visit, they would come to my room, and so they could see what it was like to live on campus for like the students and the parents. And then I was one of the tour guides. And then I also did like administration work, and then eventually like became a liaison officer and traveled around Ontario talking to students. It was a really fortunate situation that it all just kind of trickled into one another.
This opens up another. I have my biases when it comes to like what makes a good recruiter before they're a recruiter, sort of like, the classic, like, oh, you want somebody that's in hospitality because they care about the customer experience, and so the candidate experience translates nicely. But like campus recruitment, just by nature of the title, sounds like it makes sense, but I've never really I never really leaned into it, and now it makes so much more sense, just as you say it, like giving people tours of the campus and being like, we want you here. And that always came through in your recruiting. Where'd you go after that?
So from there, moved to recruiting. Actually, I worked for an immigrant serving agency. And so I ran a program that helped newcomer youth find their first job opportunities in Canada. That was incredible. And I think, again, excuse me, a really good foundation for what it's like to work with employers and sort of different types of candidates and their backgrounds. Uh, I worked for I worked for like the government for a little bit, and then finance. Now it's been startups and sort of tech since, but I feel like I've covered a lot of ground. Maybe it means I have also changed jobs far too much, but that's like a different conversation. But I feel like I've had the opportunity to see quite a bit in my recruiting career.
Which I think is, it's interesting. When I look at candidates and like the classic, when I was indoctrinated into the world of recruitment, it was a very traditional recruitment firm, and we would adopt what hiring managers in the industry I was recruiting for was a bit more traditional. And so it was like, job hoppers would be kind of like frowned upon. And what I've found is, in the tech world, like the lifespan of or the life cycle, not the lifespan, sorry, the life cycle of an employee.
Very definitive hiring process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an important distinction. Yeah. uh, the life cycle of an employee at a startup is typically, a year and a half is a reasonable amount of time to work at a company, because it grows quickly, you move on, you get bored, they go through a change, whatever the case might be. But I've always been of the mindset, and it's always bothered me, it's like the more diverse experience an individual has, the better, because they're not, this is actually a bias against people that have been at the same place for 15 plus years, on my end. But yeah, I guess you've had a wide variety of experiences, and because of that, you get to bring all these interesting, you get to bring the best practice or like an interesting tool that you learn from one job to another. What are some of the things that you've picked up along the way from maybe different industries or from past jobs that you still sort of rely on today that you can think of?
Oh, it's terrible. But like the first thing that comes to mind is like just the hiring biases that our different managers have across these industries. It's like fascinating to me to hear like sort of what their ideal candidate looks like and the things they avoid, and how if you just switch industry, it can like switch or just change. So, working for the government or like a large bank, they didn't want people who didn't have sort of corporate experience or companies of a certain size. Then we moved to tech, and anytime you see an application from someone who works for a large employer, it's always like, oh well, can they handle the ambiguity of this environment? So those are always the ones that like come to mind often. It's like, oh, every time I've started a new job or worked in a different industry, the profile of a candidate has changed
Right.
in terms of like the core things that people are looking or trying to avoid.
How how do you view those moments where you've got a hiring manager that's very sort of set in their ways and their mindset is pretty rigid, and you're working on a hard role, and the candidates that you have or that are coming in or that you're finding have kind of that, that like as you present them, maybe they have some of those traits, or like, oh, the hiring manager's got a bias against this candidate, but I know they're great. What's how do you approach that conversation, or how do you present that candidate?
I think it's fun to do a little bit of fact finding of like, where did this preference come from? Is the hiring manager just trying to hire someone exactly like themselves who has the same experience? And so is that why they're maybe prioritizing, whatever skills? Is it based on actual experience and like people they've hired in the past? And if you look at the team and the high performers, like, is it true that they all share some of the same foundation? Or is it just sort of like assumption based? And if that is, I do think that's where it's an interesting place for us to step in. I always want to learn more. And there have been instances where a hiring manager has pointed something out that I hadn't considered before. Earlier in my recruitment career, and a hiring manager say, I'm not looking to interview anyone who hasn't stayed for longer than 6 months in their last position, 6 months to a year. And
Mm-hmm.
I was someone at that time who had a number of job stints that were shorter than that. And it was a sales role that we were hiring for. And I remember like being a little bit sort of defensive of like, well, why can't we hire those people? What I also, I couldn't help but take it personal as well. And when he broke down the rationale, it was like, well, usually if you think of a sales role, speaking like sort of broad based, you're not necessarily like working on your own deal or your own leads if you've only been somewhere for like 6 months or a year. Usually, like you're taking over other people's leads or kind of pipeline, especially if you're in this case like SaaS enterprise sales. Being very specific here. But I loved that. I was like, oh, you know what? Yeah, here I am thinking that you have like a bias, but you're really just trying to be mindful of like what someone can actually achieve in this role within a certain time. It's not to say it works across the board, but it did like illuminate something for me that I hadn't considered before.
Yeah. And those are the most fun hiring managers to work with, when you've got your own approach to things and they've got theirs, and you're finding out like there's always a calibration process, but when the calibration process teaches you something new, it's kind of nice. How, having done recruitment for so long, how I imagine, I mean, I find it for myself, like I would feel pretty confident in, feeling right about my assumptions or the approach I might take with, how do you stay, like, how do you, is that something you find a challenge with, where you just come into the situation with the hiring manager and like, I've got all those preconceived notions, I know what this role is, I'm just kind of like going through the motions, or do you take a different approach to it, and like every hiring manager is like a brand new opportunity to kind of like how do you, if that's the case, how do you kind of get into that headspace, I guess?
Yeah, I guess like how much is our curiosity like leading it versus just
Mm,
like, hey, been there, done that. This is what I know what works. Let me just go like do the thing.
yeah.
Um, I mean, this is maybe a terrible way of answering it, but um, sometimes you learn that just by like putting a diverse group of folks in front of them. So that's usually like where I want to kind of get that feedback. So rather than purely just going based on like the back and forth or that intake meeting, whatever, it's like, hey, I'm going to gather, let's say, a group of people who are some of exactly what you told me you're looking for, and others where I think they could be a potential fit and benefit to the team. And I'm gonna ask you to interview them all, and then we're gonna debrief about them, and then see what worked, what didn't work, and what came out of that conversation. Now, it's always want to be mindful of like candidates' time and effort in that, but I find it's one of the most effective ways for us to do our job is like just let them speak to these people, and sort of gather the details from there.
Yeah, you're kind of, you get feedback from them and then you iterate basically.
Yeah, it should always be like a pretty live process, and changing it. But I do believe in kind of having a pretty big deep dive at the start. I'm bad. I'm guilty for roles that are maybe evergreens or that you've recruited for before. Like you kind of cheat the intake meeting. And you're like, yeah, like I know what we're doing, and you don't bother gathering like the interview questions or all of that at the start. It is never kind of beneficial at the end. And so sometimes it's good to remind yourself of like, hey, if I was a new recruiter, I would be doing this. So don't give yourself too much leeway just because you're like old and gray, that you don't have to do these things anymore. They're fundamentals for a reason.
Yeah, yeah, there you can't, the pain of having known you could have done the work up front and didn't is definitely not worth it. Having made that mistake a few times myself. Yeah.
But one piece, and when we're talking about experience and sort of like the work that I've been lucky to do, is I've never done agency. So like there's a huge sort of gap. And if I think of peers who have been recruiters for as long as I have, at some point they've had some type of agency experience. And that I used to think that like the fundamental difference would be like agencies, you've just got like a really good knack for your data and sort of like your pipelines. So like just being very metric driven. And I think that's a skill I've developed more and more over time. But I spoke to someone recently and was like, what do you think the gaps would be if someone like with my profile moved to agency? And they said the one thing I would struggle with they told me they think I would struggle with is I wouldn't have ownership over the hiring processes for these clients I'm working with. Like
Uh,
I don't own their I may be able to like inform or tweak or offer recommendations, but if the company is like already has a recruiting team and kind of that set, it's not my job to come in and rebuild their process and sort of tell them what it should be.
yeah.
And that was fascinating. I was like, I wonder what that would be like. Because I really have been working for the majority of my career in places where I do get to control what that process looks like.
Yeah. No, you find yourself having I started off my career in the agency side for a few years, and I went internal, and so it was so refreshing to come, like, don't get me wrong, there's challenges internally, but all of a sudden I had all this empathy for all the people I was working with previously, where it's just like, oh, there's shenanigans internally.
What a
And
good
then,
one.
and all the times I was just calling bullshit, or trying to like be like, oh, they're just giving me the runaround. There's a probably good chunk of those times where they weren't giving me the runaround, and they were dealing with just like the bureaucratic process of hiring at their particular organization. And that stuff's so much further out of your control, as an agency recruiter. So it what I found was that it forces you to it kind of forces you to be less, you kind of have to go into this niche of like, they really have to be amazing on paper, amazing in person, there's less room for sort of like dark horse candidates where it's like, oh, doesn't look good on paper, but
Right.
I met with them and they're incredible. Like you can't because there's so many other variables out of your control. You're really just like, this has to go through the process seamlessly. Like they have to meet them based on the paper. They have to want to meet them based on what they see on paper, and then how we present them as well. Like as an internal, you can just flip a resume to the hiring manager on Slack or something like that. Like, I think you should meet this person. Da 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 da. That is not the same
Yeah.
when you're like a third party, like until you've built up trust, right? And that's kind of, it just takes longer ultimately.
I do love those moments where it happens every now and then when our hiring manager will Slack me and be like, why am I meeting this person? I'm just like, what do you mean why? Because I said so. Like, it's booked. Like, what are you? And then I'm just like, oh yeah, maybe I had to create like a little bit of a business case for this person who I sent no resume with, and just have like a short note that's like, met them 2 years ago. Good person. Just talk to them. But yeah, I've definitely had that when they're like, why am I meeting? And I always have a moment, look around, I was like, who are you asking? It's like, I was like, excuse me.
This is my job.
Yeah, it is
I
in
know what
your
I'm
calendar.
doing.
We are past the point of questions.
Yeah. You're gonna take this candidate and you're gonna like them.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Definitely bribed a few teams though. It'd be like, I'm taking a risk on this one, and if it totally sucks, I'll go buy you some donuts. So just like, but just acknowledging it.
I like that. I like that approach. Bribery. I've never I've never. I mean, I think what's important when you're either way, like whether you're on the internal side or you're an external recruiter, is like the transparency, is like the candor. Like if you're going to present a candidate that doesn't necessarily make sense on paper, like you have to have a justification, or like at least provide your reasoning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've spent a bunch talking about obviously like the candidate side of things and presenting in recruitment. Though the one thing that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode was really just like my genuine admiration of like how you crush employment branding, and just not only just like, I don't know how to put it into words, but anytime somebody's like, "Oh, who do I like? Who should I talk to? We're struggling with employment." Like Yiorgos, got to talk to Yiorgos. Like that is the one of the many things that you're just like. It seems so natural, and folks that are listening are like, "What the hell is he talking about?" Just go through Yorgos's posts on LinkedIn and see how he talks about the companies that he works for, and how he talks about the roles that he's working on. And there's always this like authentic, genuine, like, and exciting, like you take the job description, like the boring job description, and you find ways to just like make it exciting, or even just make the company exciting. And you've worked for a bunch of different ones, I guess. How do you how does this all come about? Like, what's your approach? What's your angle on this?
Well, first of all, thank you. Oh, and it's such like a struggle because I hear you say that, and I do agree. I can take the compliment. So this is going to be one of those like, fight you over kind of saying something nice about me. I do think it's true. I do think it's a strength, that storytelling bit, but it's
Yeah.
also something like I just don't do anymore, and it's not for reasons that like I'm necessarily happy with, or not because I don't think it's necessary. I see a lot of versions of like storytelling and employer branding that exists, that not that I was the first person to do by any stretch, but like follow a similar logic to like
Yeah.
what I used to do. And I love them. Like they're just well done. I think people are getting more creative, and it always felt to me it was just important to kind of tell the story of the places I worked and my experiences with it. I wanted, the intent was always, I wanted candidates have a sense of what to expect before they would interview me. Like if you read through my posts, or if you saw anything online that I was a part of, you'd be like, oh, totally, I know what to expect from this guy when I'm interviewing with him. I wanted them to like know that I would probably be more casual than they other recruiters might be, that I would try to create a space where it was like a conversation, and that I would be there to kind of answer their questions in like a rich way. So that was like, I think, really kind of the start of it. It was like, let me give people a heads up as to what to expect. Um,
Do you know the origins of why you took that approach?
I guess you hear enough as recruiters of sort of, I mean, we get email or you get emails or sort of feedback, and people be like, oh, this was like such a nice change from like a typical recruiting call or sort of what I was expecting from others. And I guess I just started to think of like, why would people say that? Like, what was different about my style? Um, and I think it was just like tone and sort of how I set the stage for those conversations, or the expectations I put on myself for what communications and the experience would look like for anyone who is interviewing with me and the companies I worked with. Um, and I shouldn't be so like altruistic about it. Some of it was also like selfish. I started doing this a lot more when I was new to Toronto, new to like tech. I felt like I needed to sort of at least like make a name for myself in some way.
Mm.
And being public about the work I was doing was a way to achieve that. I, again, have mixed feelings about it now. I think there's power in being someone who just does your job quietly.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do that as a recruiter. I mean, we are in the sales industry, so I do think something public. And I've also stopped doing those types of posts for other reasons, which we can get into, but I feel like I've answered your question in a really roundabout way.
No. I guess the part that I'm curious about is there's still like this aspect that stands out. And so it feels like you've done a really good job of either copywriting or curating even the images, and it's, the employment branding side, like anytime you would check out the careers page of any of the companies that you were at, it was always, a cut above the rest. And so I guess the thought, the curiosity, I guess I'm just curious, like, is there, do you pull experiences from all the way back to sort of like campus recruitment into it, or are there other skill sets that you're bringing in, or is it really just like, I'm, like a version of Pinterest, except like oh, I like this person's approach, I'm going to steal this part, and it's just like this thing that you worked on consistently, and it became your brand, and your approach became your own after you kind of like pulled a bunch of collection, like, I guess, or did you take classes, or did you pull in like some marketing stuff? Like, I guess curious to know like how it all came about.
No classes or anything. Maybe I should take like grow class or something like that to really like get better. Um, Maybe it does go back to some of those early recruiting experiences of like, if I think of being a campus tour guide, so I also had a bad reputation for maybe having campus tours that were far too long. No surprise there, especially if it was just like maybe if it was just one family on the tour, I would do everything for them. So like I'd be like, all right, how much of like a detailed tour do you want? I can give you like the high level of like, we'll just walk around, we'll go visit sort of a residence, we'll go check out a lecture hall, we'll see kind of the gym, and call it a day.
Yeah.
And when they would ask, like, no, I'd love to, like, maybe, I always remember this one. It was like a drama kid. It's like, can we go, like, see backstage and, like, go to the theater? And I was like, oh, yeah, I can make this happen. I've got the keys, And suddenly, like, what's meant to be an hour tour is 3 hours. So I think it was all this sort of interest of showing something, kind of anticipating what someone would want to know, even to this day as a recruiter, and kind of getting ahead of those questions, giving them those insights before, and seeing what means we can share it. And yeah, trying to kind of like break down the barriers, I think, too, to the recruitment process. So it is a black hole for most people.
Yeah.
Most people don't get feedback on their performance. Most people don't get email communications about timelines or sort of expectations. and they're never really sure of what recruiters or hiring managers are looking for. I'm lucky to be on the other side, so why not like share that or kind of illuminate it where possible, so that way people hopefully like can feel more comfortable in what they're getting themselves into and sort of what they're signing up for when they apply for a role or interview, or even just kind of like the industry as a whole.
We've spent a bit of time obviously talking about the things that I'm uh, distinctly aware of your strengths, just because we had the good fortune of working together for a bit. But your career's evolved significantly since we last worked together, and I'm curious. I would love to just kind of like pick your brain on some of the challenges and problems that you've been chipping away at for other companies above and beyond recruitment, like maybe even just kind of picking up and kind of explaining how your roles expanded and from a career perspective for the recruiters out there that have been recruiters for a long time, and how you've, because I know you've worked on some things outside of it as well. So
Yeah, I've been lucky to, build the foundations for recruiting processes now at companies that didn't have them, to like lead the function. To also, I think one of the more complicated parts of our job is to match hiring plans with headcount plans and sort of all of those expectations, and running our data machine. So there's clear kind of transparency in what it takes to bring people on board. I think something that it relates, and if we go back to even just that employer branding side of things and that storytelling piece, I think something else that has happened over the course of my career is experiencing like layoffs, ones at companies that maybe had mass layoffs that I wasn't involved in, and then a few where I was a part of those layoffs. And those were experiences that have also like fundamentally shifted my approach to recruitment, and maybe why, and I hate this, I hate that this has changed, but why I have more hesitancy about like sharing the stories of the places I work, because I think of, I have this hyper like, I guess, anxiety or sort of worry about selling people on an opportunity that might not
yeah,
actually like come to fruition,
yeah,
or being really inauthentic. um, and it's like, how do you balance that with our responsibility of telling
yeah,
the stories of the places we work, which I should say, like, I do fundamentally think is a job of a recruiter. Like, fundamentally, we need to dedicate a time each week to some form of employer branding initiatives, and
okay,
they need to be public. It can't just be all behind the scenes and relationship based.
yeah,
Uh, but I get so worried about it now because I look back at the places where I have posted and everything was not just that it's glowing, but you're talking about your experience and you're talking about feeling engaged and excited. Um, and then you find yourself laid off, or the people you hired have all been laid off. And it's like, oh, did I set this up? Like, did I create this sort of lie? Was I a part of building this like misconception about what the company was capable of? And that those are conversations I never thought of earlier in my career, and certainly didn't think I'd be having, and ones that I frankly still like struggle with.
hmm. How's your approach changed, would you say? Like I know what you're talking about firsthand, and have seen, like, it is it's definitely a thing that crosses your mind, I would imagine, as a human being and as a recruiter. Like, I'm talent attraction, I'm trying to attract people to this company. Companies aren't perfect. There's always aspects of the company's culture, or just like the runway, that's the realistic runway versus what, they just raised a bunch of money, but actually a bunch of it was to pay debts or something like that. And so, like, what there's not smoke and mirrors. It's just the tech ecosystem can kind of operate that way, and everybody is putting their best foot. Is similarly to like social media. You see everybody's highlight reel,
Yeah.
but you don't see the negatives as much. And so I guess how has your relationship to those conversations changed with candidates? I remember how mine did, but I'm just curious, like you brought it up.
Yeah.
What's different?
I think so how I break down some of those common questions is different. So for more experienced candidates, if we're thinking about tech, like they will ask you about funding, they'll know the nuances of it. And so making sure you have that. But for folks who maybe are new to the industry and aren't prepared with those types of questions, I will still answer them and anticipate and be like, hey, you're not asking me about X, but you should.
Yeah.
And so here's what I'm going to do. I think I talk to like historical information a lot more. So whether that's like historically, this is what layoffs have looked like or haven't looked like at X place, or even like this is how many people got their bonuses last year. Like here's the actual number. So that way you can have like real data. So even if a candidate isn't asking for those specifics, I'll make sure that I have them. And then the side that I guess to think of like more of the sort of outward facing is like, unfortunately, it just like I don't talk online as much about the places I've worked or I work at. And if I do, it's very like small, minimal updates. Again, more data driven than just sort of what my experience has been like.
Yeah.
The last one though, I think is important. I'm mindful in my conversations, and I catch myself with candidates is when they ask like, what's the culture like of the places you work, or sort of what are the good things? I always say it's in my experience on this team, in my
Yeah.
experience working with X.
Yeah.
And
It's
it
subjective.
very much, and maybe I always hoped that they would understand that it was like, well, my own personal experience. I can't speak for the organization, but now I just call it out much more directly.
Yeah.
What have you changed?
Well, from a fractional recruitment perspective, which is how I'm still involved in it, I think the awkward thing is that like when people do ask the question like how is the culture, it's like I'm not really embedded in the culture. It's harder for me to answer, right? So then you're limited to like, oh, these are the values that the company has shared with us. These are the ones that I see them really living. And so, we're embedded typically. So, we'll be in their Slack groups and we'll show up to their town halls and whatnot. But that it doesn't feel like we can, especially at the beginning, like, I'm technically a new employee. I've just only started working there for a few weeks kind of deal. And that's changed in the sense that I'm just hyper transparent about that. Like, here's what I know. I know that based on what we're looking for and based on what you have on paper, there's an interest in your profile because that's what the hiring managers told me. But when it comes to the culture, what I usually do is rather than feeling, I'm sort of like a relayer of information. So it's like, this is what's important to the candidate. And then that'll give me more conversation pieces to chat about with the hiring manager, and then I'll effective. So it becomes one of those circumstances of like I gather information a bit more than just having it at my disposal. And so I find, oh, that's a really good question. I don't know, but I'm going to find out for you kind of deal. And I have no shame in that because I would rather say I don't know. And I've always gotten more, it feels like candidates have respected that answer far more than just like parroting off the values for the sake of like, oh yeah, I know their company values and I've read their Glassdoor, so I can hint at what some of the challenges might be. But I rather, and what I recommend typically to them is like, use this experience with the hiring manager to really dig in and find out what they think, because again, to your point, it's subjective. Like, my experience is not going to be their experience.
Right. This actually reminds me of when we used to work together. So I'm literally like, I remember it of when we were filling out the lever sort of like, back end and being like, okay, what's the template look like for when we're doing intake calls? And something that I loved that I learned from you and that was important to you at the time is like, you always have some section that's like compensation. So
Yeah.
what's their comp expectations, blah, blah, blah. And you were like, oh, and we're also going to add a field about like, what are their motivators? So what are things that they've brought up over the conversation that's really important to them? So whether that's maybe some of the more ongoing topics like learning and development or whatever, or maybe there's some other nuances that have come through your interviews, and track those as well. So that way, when you are making an offer or you're moving to those stages, you can look back and reflect on it, like what you just said. But it also, not that I do this often, but there are times too when I may be presenting an offer and they might have another offer on the table or more than one. And you reflect back on the early conversation, like, you told me all of these things matter to you. And I know that the offer I'm making actually doesn't meet all of those things. But what you're telling me about the other company does. So like, I'm not going to sell you hard on this. Like, that's not my job. Take the time that you need. But like, I'm also comfortable recognizing where there are gaps and be like, you know, that what you decide to do with the information is up to you as a candidate. But it's funny, I haven't thought of it in forever, but just when you were talking about those early conversations, I remember distinctively how we built out those lever templates and sort of the categories of things that we would track in our calls.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's easy to forget too, because you ask it at the beginning, and then the typical course of an interview cycle happens, and then the recruiter forgets and the candidate forgets too. They get whisked away with the journey and things are exciting, and they're like, oh, you know, they're talking to their partner. I'm like, oh, I'm moving to the next round, or
Yes.
you know, or they're telling their friends. And it's very much like, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of doing well in an interview in general. And what you said was interesting, because I feel like people listening, some people, maybe not like the recruiters, maybe like founders or senior leaders that are like hiring managers, might kind of be like, oh, really? You want to like dissuade a candidate? And you're not dissuading a candidate, but like, you would leave room for them to make their own choice instead of hard pitching them. And I find myself agreeing with you, but I find it's probably like controversial or less talked about, in the sense that like, if you know, based on everything that the candidates told you, that like their shelf life with the organization, the life cycle rather, is
not lifespan.
not lifespan. If you know, based on their motivations for making a change, that like ultimately the other company, and not every candidate, I think you do a really good job of that as well. It's like you build a really strong relationship with the candidates, where you've got all this extra data on like everything else. Whereas like sometimes I find I just compares, like I don't go as deep, or I don't build up that relationship as closely. But they're comfortable sharing like, oh, I've got this other offer. You get that with some candidates, you don't get them with all. But when they come to you and you're like, oh, like that actually sounds more aligned with what you're looking for, I think at the end of the day, maybe, you know, you don't close that particular role, and that candidate would have been good, but like, for how long would they have been good, right? Like, is it just 6? Like, yes, you could have closed the role, but like that's a short-term win, as opposed to like, you really truly want that person that's like, if you can get all their motivations, like, I'm leaving this company because there's no growth for me, and the person I report into, I'm not learning anything. And if they come in, you know, over to your organization and it's the exact same experience, then what are you offering them, right? Like, oh, maybe it's a 10K. That 10K bump isn't going to cover the gap that they originally left their first organization for.
Right. Yeah. And what I'm going to say next might not help my sort of business case to why founders should hire me or something like that. But it is in the strategic interest of us as recruiters to build these long-term relationships with candidates. I am shocked with how undervalued that is amongst fellow recruiters. We will meet these candidates again. Whether that's through other recruitment processes where they're applying for jobs, when we change companies, or when potentially, we're changing jobs and we're applying to companies that they've now worked for. You want these people to think of you highly. You want them to come back to you. You know, I have a ton of messages in my inbox right now from the candidates I interviewed years and years ago, who are interested in a role that I've just posted. I haven't spoken to them since those interview processes, but like kept up with their career. I I value that. That to me is such a like a measure of success, and one I don't take lightly. But and recruiters really need to think about that. Like this is our reputation. It's
Mm,
not just
mm,
the company's reputation in the market. And same for hiring teams as well. Like if you are the hiring manager or even if you're just on the panel, you will meet these people again. And they might be on the opposite side. And you know, you don't want to be in a situation where they're evaluating you and they're like, "Oh, you actually were really horrible to me
yeah.
during the interview process." Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to advocate for you coming here regardless of your skill set.
Yeah.
Um, and that is something that I remember finding really refreshing. Again, when you and I worked together, I've said this to you before, but I remember at some point, I don't know, you put a candidate in my pipeline in the ATS. And I remember I'm always very a stickler for someone putting someone into my pipeline without telling me why, because I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Hey,
what is this
hey,
name? Why
who
are
is
they
this?
here? Why
Yeah.
are they in that stage? And I maybe get a little bit too angry about it, and be like, you know, Martin, who's this dude? Why is he in my like software engineering pipeline? And you're like, oh, you know, literally a kind of similar thing is you're like, I interviewed, you know, this candidate years ago. We've kept in the loop. The company I was working for at the time wasn't the right fit, but all of the skill set in there, like they reached out to me kind of casually, or you reached out to them for a coffee, and they're back. And
Yeah.
that that mindset, that attitude, that approach that you had, yeah, like I think fundamentally reprioritized that in my own kind of approach to recruiting.
I mean, long-term games, I guess, right? Like, I see it almost as like, um, I'm reminded of like buying a home and working with a realtor and working with, you know,
Yeah.
not great realtors and working with like, and now I have the one that I will call, and she knows I'll call her because she's always done right by me, even if it was like a hard answer, or like we didn't get the house that we wanted and whatnot. And I've worked with the like super short term transactional, and it just makes it easier if you play the long game, I think. And
Yeah.
it's just like, okay, I'm you it's a fine balance, right? Like what you're kind of illustrating is like, you're like, oh, you know, founders might not like hearing this or something, or you're not making a case for yourself. But you, if anything, that should be such a stronger case, because the network of people that you bring along with you when you post a role, right, is massive now, because you've got all these, you can sort of like reap the benefits of all the hard work that you've put in over the years, versus just start from scratch for every role kind of deal, right? And that's not brought up enough, that's not valued enough, that's not even, you know, when have you seen on a job description for a talent acquisition person, or, you know, and any type of recruitment role where it's like must have a strong network? Like that's literally our jobs.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you say that too, because I don't think it's valued as much when it comes to those like talent roles,
Mm,
whether that's a head of talent or just a recruiter. But you and I know that when we hire senior leadership in other parts of the organization, one of the things we're doing is to hire their network, right? And one of the first questions that the team will have when they join is like, "Hey, where are your referrals?"
yeah, yeah.
And they're like, "It's day two." I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't hire you to like sit here and look pretty. Where's your list?" Like that's
Yeah.
why we hired you.
What's
That
your
is
LinkedIn password? Let's
fundamentally
go.
kind of the value proposition, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't necessarily hear that quite as much when it comes to filling our roles. But we certainly have that lens when we hire other leadership.
What's caught your attention in the recruitment space as of late? I mean, you and I have been at it for quite some time in the recruitment world. There's been a lot of change. I shudder to say AI and all that fun stuff, but you know, like I'm sure there's, you know, areas of that you're paying attention to. I'm curious what like what's captured your interest and attention, or what part of, if this is the part of your career where you're sharpening your saw, how are you sharpening it? And yeah.
Oh, I don't. Well, this is going to be more of like passive use, but like the note takers, good Lord, I am never going back. Then like we get pitched products all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like there will be someone reaching like, I have this new thing that's going to revolutionize how you recruit. And it's like, no, it really hasn't changed anything. The note takers, different story. The first second I turned that baby on, I was like, oh yes. And
Yeah.
the actually I should go more than just the surface sort of. So the initial benefit is when we don't have to type the entire time during the conversation. It's nice to reflect on the notes. It breaks things down beautifully, all of that sort of stuff. But the other benefit, which is important to you, is if you are adding the note taker, whether it has an audio recording or a video recording, to later stages in the interview process that you're not involved in, it helps us as recruitment teams audit our hiring managers, audit our hiring teams. I mean, I can't physically sit in every interview, but quality control is really important, very much like they do in sales, right? So now with these AI tools, I'm able to go through and be like, hey, I'm going to just pick this 10th interview from this month, and I'm going to listen in and see what the questions were, how the hiring manager engaged with the candidate. Did they kind of probe the way that we want them to probe? All of those things. So that I do think has fundamentally changed because we have such visibility now into all stages of the recruitment process. And it's something that hiring teams, I think, often forget is, so when you're doing like feedback huddles or debriefs, they're like, well, what did you think of this person? It's like, I spoke to them for 20 minutes. I was like, you're the ones who spent 2 hours with them. Like, I got nothing. Like our relationship is often just very transactional, even if it's, even if we're going in a deeper layer, like I'm just emailing them back and forth, but our on-call time is usually less than the hiring teams. So I do love that now I have even more data at my disposal about what has happened with the candidate throughout the process.
Are there particular note takers that you're a fan of? Did you try them all? Did you just go with how did you go about the selection process? Because there's a million out there now. It's insane.
Yeah, did try quite a bit. I found, so for the more general ones that could be used for like a variety of purposes, they never truly understood the nature of like a recruiting call or an interview. And so that was a big defining one. It's like, oh, you're treating this conversation like it's two colleagues. As opposed to like something where someone's being assessed, or how they fit into our back-end tools. So for me, the one that I decided to go with and I champion is MetaView. I think it's kind of an incredible tool and it's really proved its worth. Hashtag not sponsored, hashtag would welcome swag. But I think for that, regardless of where people end up going, I think just be mindful of whether or not it knows the core intent of the conversations it's joining. And in the case of MetaView, it did. It is built for recruiters. And so it just on the back end does a lot more. Also, it was important to you to, the audio and the video recording pieces. I want to be able to separate those. I don't have the video recordings I don't think there's any need for me to reassess a candidate's kind of like visual presence in an interview, and frankly, nor do I want to be on video for like the lifetime of a company for recruiters in 10 years to be like, who's this douchebag running this interview? So that was also a part of the filter.
I love what you said about how it gives you more information. It's obvious as you say it, but it's not something I led with. Big fan of MetaView myself. That's my note taker of choice. I use Fathom for sort of like business meetings and whatnot because I find its transcriptions pretty good. But like when it's actual recruiting, there's two things that like maybe kind of I'd love to hear your perspective on. What I've found it good for is sort of getting ahead of sort of like the technical assessment questions. And so that gives me the like, okay, so we're going to be using, MetaView or a recorder, like a screen recording tool of some sort. Now I'm going to ask, I want to be able to ask more technical questions on your behalf, hiring manager.
Yeah.
And so that you can listen into the responses ahead. So you're kind of like, you're not getting rid of stages necessarily, but the filter, the quality of information up front is better. And so then you can share those like snippets with, like, that's one of the things I've really loved and used, like it is part of the intake essentially, is like, this is how it's going to work because we get ahead of things a lot better.
Yeah, and for the hiring manager to like hear their confidence level, especially on those technical questions,
Yeah.
As someone who has a foundation technical recruiting, but who's never been like a dev or something like that, there are limits. At the end of the day, I always think like if there are 3 layers of questioning, I can go to level 2, but like I can't bridge the gap to level 3. So in that case, I am just reading from a script, and unfortunately, I'm not able to necessarily like call BS on a candidate if they're just lying to me about that entire dev process. But to get to level 2, happy with, but like the note taker means that you can assess it even further.
Have you encountered a lot of those fake candidates or candidates using AI during the interview process? Like, I've heard and seen a bunch about it, and it feels like it's the current boogeyman of the like recruitment world. But do you have any tales from the trenches, so to speak?
Not like a juicy one, because no one was like outright faking it or sort of like not a real person.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, well, no, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it would be kind of fun to like experience it firsthand, I guess. I'd be willing to waste that 30 minutes.
100%. Like, ooh, this is gonna be good. Like, even
the one I still laugh at, because it's just like the first time a candidate had their own note taker, and so it was my note taker and their note taker, and I was like, I don't know if I like this. And just like the hypocrisy of being like, no, I get to record you. You don't get to record me. And of course that naturally goes into me building like, okay, what's our process for when this happens? Let me build something into our foundation. But that one really made me laugh, because I was just like, oh, what a hypocrite. It never crossed my mind that they would start interview or bring it. In this case, I guess the juicy piece is that I have had a candidate who brought in an interview, what I thought was an interview note taker, but it wasn't. What it did is it would listen to the call and then it would type up answers.
Okay.
So they were just like, however that works, it was sort of like the prompt, it would just build the prompt, and so that they were not qualified for the role, but their AI tool would at least help them answer it.
It sounded like they were, like it would see, that one's interesting. Like, that's a bold one, because and I imagine you would use that stunt on a larger organization, because you can truly get lost as an employee in a larger organization, but that's not lasting at a startup or even a small business. Like, you will be found out.
Yeah, and this doesn't relate to the AI of it all, but I remember years ago, this was such a great sort of like moment. Was this even when we worked together, or was it that long ago? But candidate connected with me on LinkedIn for a QA role, and on LinkedIn and their resume, that's how they had it labeled. They've been doing that for a year in their current organization. And the recruiter at their company saw that we connected and just sent me a message being like, hey, I'm going to make assumptions. You connected with this person. FYI, that's not their job. And we are actively working with LinkedIn on getting it removed. They are not a QA at our company. They are a TSR. They're lying, and we know that they're looking to leave. And the other recruiter is like, I'm sure your interview processes will find this out pretty quickly. But it's sort of that relationship that we have with one another. That was like and it just being like a much smaller world than maybe people think. But you're 100% right. Maybe you can get away with this in a larger organization, but a smaller one, like, it's going to be discovered. I would at least think so.
A futile mission, it feels like.
Yeah.
Yiorgos, we've talked about a lot. Any other things on the horizon that you're like excited about in the recruitment world or in the people ops space that you want to talk about?
Ooh, what am I like looking forward to, or more and more? I do love how many more folks are like kind of breaking down barriers to like the recruiting process and sharing more insights. Always appreciate someone's like hot tip. I think we need to move past the like only submit your resume in a PDF. I was like, I think we all know that by now. Let's offer a little bit more insights,
Thanks, 1991. Appreciate
yeah,
it.
yeah. I mean, I hope that's understood now. But I think there's a really good community of folks, and that makes me excited. I am curious if the market picks back up and in the places that we work, if we'll see talent teams being more distinguished from people or HR teams. I think a few years ago when the market was high, that split started to happen. So you would see like heads of talents and heads of people. Now that the market has shrunk and sort of it's an employer's market, we see those roles combined again, which I don't necessarily think is the strategic move. So curious to see where we level out in that, if things pick back up, and sort of what those what the dynamics look like.
Yeah, two very different jobs. Anytime I'm talking to founders or senior leaders at startups that we're consulting, that quite like typically we're helping them with their first hire and like their first HR recruitment hire, and the question is always like, do we look for the unicorn that can do both like HR and recruitment? And like, yes, they do exist, but I fundamentally believe that like doing a good job of both of those things for a long period of time isn't sustainable. And like, a recruiter's calendar is often dictated by the meetings that they have with candidates, and HR's calendar is often dictated by meetings with internal employees. And then when do you have time to do any of the other things that each of those roles requires? And it's just, so if the question is always like, do you want someone to come in and do a half-assed job of both? Or do you like, does it make sense? And often I've not really seen a case where it makes sense to just really become obsessed with like, oh no, we just want one person to do both of these things, or one team to do all of these things consolidated. Like it doesn't, I'd be curious to see something other than that, or, happy to like listen to an argument, opposing it. But yeah, I don't know. What's your take?
No, I agree. And I still like, the day when onboarding happens and like the new employees message you and like, you've got 1 week and then you better stop slacking me. I was like, unless it's a referral, like you gotta wean off of me. And they're like, but we have a relationship. And this goes counter to everything I said at the start. It's like, no. Once we work together, I don't want to talk to you anymore. When you're a candidate and then when you're looking for your next job, let's chat. But yeah, there's always the influx of slacks. And I'm like, why are you talking to me? And they're like, but aren't you? It's like, no. But yeah, if we're going to finish up, I do have to say, like, Martin, you truly are. I mean, we worked together for such a short period, but fundamentally, I think like I learned so much, but did shape, I think, an approach to recruitment that I have. So when I hear about the things that matter to you, or sort of like even the things that I credit myself as being like decent at, I do think there is like a foundation learned there. So I'm always grateful for it.
Thank you.
And I say that, and to the listener, let me also drop this hot take. Martin was also interviewed for a podcast recently where he was asked a question of who was his best recruiter hire ever. And I was not named. Wait, to my shock, when I'm sitting out in the garden listening to this podcast and waiting to hear my name, even my middle names, and being left to dry. So no. But it cracked me up.
And that's all the time we have for today's podcast.
No, imagine. But yes, no, I thought it was my time to shine and I didn't get anything. So anyway, needless to say, we've been meeting with the therapist since that podcast dropped.
Wow. Wild. No.
I was waiting for you to ask me that question. Who's your favorite manager? And be like, here's my chance to turn the tables.
No, it's definitely not me. Oh my God. When you were very gracious with me, because you're like, oh, this little baby manager's got his training wheels on. And I enjoyed our time together. I am very lucky to have worked with a ton of super talented recruiters. I don't know that there's many people that I've hired that I feel like was like a mishire, or I didn't learn something from them or they didn't learn something from me. Chinger's hard to beat. I'm sorry. And I'll give you some context on this. Is like, I'm defending myself.
I
Now.
know. I love it. I love it.
I feel like I have the right to defend myself on this. But
I was like, I want to see the spreadsheet where you broke this down.
Basically, when I took the role, I was hiring for the team before I actually started at the company. I was like tapping people on the shoulder and whatnot. And it was a bit of a long shot. So there's like this underdog story to it, which is always nice and fun for me. But basically what I was told is like nobody on the team seems to be able to crack more than like 2 or 3 hires per month. And, you know, we're not going to help us hit our goals, and definitely not going to help us hit our goals, like the new large goals and the reason we were building out the team. And so he didn't come in saying like, oh yeah, I'm going to crush this or anything like that. But like, I've never seen there was month after month where he was making anywhere from like 8 to 12 placements per month, and like technical roles, complicated roles. It's not like, 8 or 9 account managers. And like, he's a force to be reckoned with. And that's, I think I need to think more about how I recall the people I work with in the past and how I position them. But he's like, I would love there to be like a competition or some like measurable away, but that's a little bit overly ridiculous. But
no, I think you think of it as your own like alumni group. So BetaKit had an article, I mean, it's probably, I don't know if it's a year ago, but let's say somewhat recent, where they looked at all the top startups in the Canadian ecosystem and tried to look for trends. They found that like a bunch of them had worked at Uber. Like that was a common theme amongst these new executive teams. And I feel like it would be neat for you to do the same thing. Like who are the alumni of folks that you hired and what are they doing now? And I think that you'll be proud of the group, and I think that we all have a shared experience of having the pleasure of working with you. Yeah,
I appreciate you ending it on a much more reasonable note,
rather than you feeling pressured to be like, "Oh my god, maybe Yiorgos angry again."
I think you'd have the same. Like you've built some pretty awesome companies yourself since we moved on from working together. Nothing but mutual respect, Yiorgos. Yeah.
Very much. Thank you.
And less opportunity for me to razz you. So that's always been the case, though. So.
Yeah, I remember you were like the first person in a workplace setting when describing like what it was like to work with me. The like final bullet was like, and sassy. I was like, yeah, I didn't really like think of that, but if we have a good relationship with one another, it will involve that level of communication. And if it doesn't, then like it means we don't get on.
If anything resonates with folks from this conversation, any final like plugs, or do you want folks to reach out to you on LinkedIn and connect specifically for anything or anything like that? What's the best way to get a hold of you if they want to?
Oh, please always reach out. I love learning from my peers. Whether it's just in terms of approach or tools. I think it's like one of my favorite parts of working in our industry. I think we do a good job of helping each other out. So yeah, please be connected.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll share your details in all the regular places you see on podcasts. And so, yeah, Yiorgos, thanks again for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Martin.
Awesome. Take care, everyone. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're not already a member of the community, please join us at thepeoplepeoplegroup.com.